A tightly woven story that's concise and well thought out till the end is usually what will deliver the most satisfying ending, and while the same can't be said for rather unconventional and, to be blunt, batshit crazy manga like Gantz, for better or for worse, reading them will always be a journey unlike anything else. One series that should definitely be placed on the higher end of this scale is Fire Punch. Having ended just over a month ago, Fire Punch follows a rather unique protagonist called Agni who's constantly burning. In a post-apocalyptic world frozen over by a mysterious being called the Ice Witch, some members of the declining population have powers known as blessings. Main character Agni has a regenerative blessing, which sounds fantastic until a fire wielder kills everyone in his village including his sister, and leaves him on fire for all eternity. Unable to die, he uses his desire for revenge to move forward. With near-immortal beings in shows, it's common for violence to be amped up due to the limits of mortality being thrown out the window, but Fire Punch really manages to push this to the extreme. In the very first chapter we have Agni chopping his limbs off to feed people in his village, and it's treated as nothing more than an inconvenience despite how horrifying a prospect that is. When this is treated as something relatively standard, it really sets the tone for the rest of the manga, letting us realise the level of violence we'll be dealing with. Just as heavy as the violence is the tragedy of our main character. This is initially a revenge story, but the goalposts frequently change throughout the story as Agni meets new people and reflects on his journey, being at odds with his self-destructive hatred for his sister's murderer and the last words she said to him, "Live." The carefully laid out development of his character that perfectly aligns with one of the main themes of the manga, finding a reason to carry on, results in one of the most sympathetic, tragic protagonists I've seen, and stands out as some fantastic writing in a manga that could otherwise be seen as complete madness. The action in this manga is chaotic and unpredictable, with Fire Punch often using these sequences to bring in characters in absurd ways. On top of the fact that they're excellently choreographed with superb paneling making fights easy to follow, new characters with their blessings keep things fresh. Introductions are scarce and powers have little explanation, leaving the reader to figure things out in combat. This show not tell approach kept me engaged in the fights and I couldn't stop reading during moments like this, wanting to see what other crazy twists the manga was going to throw at me. Powers are always kept simple, which is good as the reader catches on to everyone's blessings quickly, with emphasis being put on making them as violent as possible if anything. For the record, with 83 chapters there can only really be a handful of proper fights, but regardless, this series does them well. The mangaka knows how to evoke an instant reaction, and Fire Punch manages to be a fantastic pure action series if that's what you want out of it. Action aside, a lot of the bizarreness of the story comes from this weird fixation with cinema and old movies. We have a character wanting to become a director, someone wanting to destroy the world to get a chance to see one of the Star Wars films. This is all said with complete seriousness and it's hard to tell what any of it means. Hardcore symbolism? Completely meaningless? God knows. I've managed to relate some of the cinema talk to certain character motivations, but a lot of it still went over my head, intentionally or not, and that'll probably be the same for anyone reading this. It doesn't take away from this story or anything, but when people talk about this manga being completely bonkers, they're normally talking about this stuff, so I thought it's good to mention it. Whatever the mangaka's intentions were with this work, it's undeniable that he created some fantastic moments in it. The action is some of the best I've seen in recent manga, Agni is a surprisingly complex protagonist, and a fair few of the characters from the supporting cast, despite seeming like nutjobs at the beginning, managed to deliver some pretty emotional moments. All the components of this manga come together to create something truly special, and for this reason, I can recommend it to basically anyone.